Welcome back to my series on chess opening theory. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the Queen G4 sideline in the Winawer variation of the French defense. So the French defense, it begins with the moves E4, E6, D4, D5. And the Winawer is when white plays knight to C3 and black plays bishop to B4. So, in a previous video, I said that against most queen moves, such as queen to e2, queen to f3, and queen to d3, black should just play d takes e4. However, against the move queen g4, this is not really a good idea, because after d takes e4, queen takes g7, the rook is under attack, so black's not quite, losing yet. Black can just play queen to f6. White can go back to g3, and in this position, I much prefer white, and the engine does too. If we turn it on, it gives white quite a sizable advantage here, maybe even a winning advantage just from a positional standpoint, since black's pawn structure is not looking so good, and white has some targets to maybe attack. Like white probably wants to just play knight e2 first, just to keep this guy and this guy defended and all that. But this is just a very pleasant position for white, so that's why in this position, even though against other moves like queen to f3, queen to d3, queen to e2, d takes e4 is a good move, here it's not. Here we should react to this stuff over here. And the best way to react is to just play knight f6, just to develop. We're not worried too much about losing this pawn since we'll just gain a pawn back. So white will then generally play queen takes g7, otherwise what was the point of queen to g4? If white moves the queen again, then could probably just take this pawn, maybe take with the knight, maybe take with the pawn, that kind of stuff. But anyway, rook to g8, both the pawn and the rook are defended. Queen only has one square to go to, which is h6. And now here, I like to play pawn to c5. It's just a move that appears in many variations of the Winawer. It's kind of unleashing our inner Sicilian as we strike at white's center. And now here, there are about three moves that have been played, and a fourth move that's also kind of worth considering. And the three moves are a3, but we've actually already looked at a3. After bishop takes c3 check, b takes c3, d takes e4, we already have a game that features this position. That's the 4a3 sideline. So, this thing is nothing new. We already know how to deal with this. It's not a problem for us in this line. So back here, another move to consider, and which has been played, is knight to e2, just defending this knight. And against knight to e2, we can take this pawn, because white probably does not want to take back with their knight. If white does take back with their knight, we can push, and we can keep pushing. In fact, white isn't even going to be able to, get this bishop in exchange for the knight on c3, because after knight f3, d4, if white tries a3, b4 stuff, this is a common way of dealing with this pin. Black has a strong in-between move, bishop to f8, and then black will just, win a piece here. So that is why after knight e2, c takes d4, or taking the pawn is not a good idea for white. Right now, white could try e5, but this would lead to something similar to what we're going to see. In fact, it's going to kind of be a worse version of it. And let's see. Here, engine likes b takes c3. The reason why e takes f6 right away isn't so good is because this capture comes with check, and it would win the rook with also promoting to a queen. So, that's very bad. So that's why white has to take here instead of taking this right away. There are two pieces under attack, but black can be very active here, develop their rook, maybe bring their bishop back to c5, and after e takes f6, pawn to e5, black has the center, black has very nice development, and black's not too worried about queen takes h7, because black will just win a pawn back, and, black is quite happy here. here. So overall, I like this potential position for black, after knight e2. And another move to consider, of course, which has not been played, probably with good reason, is just d takes c5. Similar thing as I mentioned before, just rook g6, queen h4, can even go rook g4 just to maybe get the rook to participate over here. Queen h6, and then, black has a number of good moves here, like rook g6 with a move repetition is fine, but I personally don't like such early move repetitions. I like to play for a win. d4 and knight takes e4 are also equal. They're also 0-0 according to the engine. And overall, from a practical standpoint, I think black is just winning here. I really like black's position. I think white's pieces are all very silly here. Like, where's white's development, But anyway, this is not what happened in the game. Instead, today we're going to be looking a little bit at the move pawn to e5. And before continuing, I thought I should just say something really quick about the players. So, unfortunately, I was not able to find much, if any, information about the players. First, it's actually pretty interesting that on Lichess, they're listed as being 2200s, but on FIDE, their ratings are like 1200 and 1600. Based off of the accuracy of their moves in this game, I would say 2200 is probably more accurate. However, it might not actually be 2200 in classical chess, because I wasn't really able to find information about this tournament either. Like, I looked up this code up here and just couldn't find anything. And on FIDE, I was able to see the birth year of both players. There's white is from Spain and black is from Switzerland. And given all this information, even though I wasn't able to confirm this theory, I checked on Google, put in some terms, I think this was a correspondence game. Given how accurately the players played this game, I think that this was a game of correspondence chess, which is it's a very interesting form of chess, and it's often very valuable for opening theory because the players have a lot of time to think about their moves, so they'll often play very good moves. Even if they might not necessarily be title players, they'll still very often find very good moves and play some really excellent chess. So that's about all that I could find about these players. I don't know if they have any the titles in correspondence chess, since I know that it has its own separate title system. I tried googling them with correspondence chess in the search as well, and I still couldn't find anything. So sadly, couldn't find any information there, but I do have a theory, and this game is very excellent. It is very valuable just from a theoretical point of view. And if you happen to know anything about these players or about correspondence chess in general, then do let me know in the video description. And on with the game. So white now plays pawn to e5, trying to strike back at basically try to counter black's threat of c takes d4, all that kind of stuff. But black just plays c takes d4 anyway. E takes f6, d takes c3. White has to react to the threat that black now has of c takes b2. White can't really take this pawn because bishop takes c3 would win the rook. White can't really attack the bishop because c takes b2 would win the rook, and not only win the rook, but also promote to a queen. Or to a rook, to be funny. Be like, oh, that's not a white rook, it's a black rook now. And white moving their king is very silly, so as a result, the move b3 is more or less forced. Moving the king would probably actually be very dangerous, simply because black might be able to launch some kind of attack on it. So black now develops, playing knight to d7, very sensible move. Black's not too worried about losing the pawn on h7 because black can take the f6 pawn. When instead, in fact, black might be quite happy to get rid of this pawn on f6 just because it's, controlling some important squares in black's camp. White plays knight to f3. Black now takes on f6, getting rid of that annoying pawn. We have queen takes h7, queen to h8. Black is okay with trading here. Black is okay with playing an endgame because the endgame is still very interesting. Since while white would have this strong passed pawn, black has these central pawns. And also this guy as well. If you look at black's pawn structure, all the pawns are in one island. They are all one clump, whereas white has two clumps. So it could be argued that black has the better pawn structure as well. So overall, very interesting stuff. So white trades. I think trading probably is best. That's just because black's pieces are kind of a bit more active than white's, in my opinion. Like the rook is participating, the queen on h8 is doing some good stuff. It will be supporting this pawn in a way. This pawn's pretty annoying, controlling some squares in white's camp. White now plays bishop to e2. Thought I should note really quick that there's probably a very good reason why white didn't instead play bishop to d3. Like bishop to b5, black would probably just play a6 or something, and maybe white trades their bishop for the knights or something, but, I don't think that's a good idea, just giving black the two bishops in the endgame. But anyway, the reason why white probably did not play bishop to d3 is because black would play pawn to e5 with tempo, kind of forcing white to move, their bishop again, because pawn to e4 would be coming. If white tries something like bishop to f5, then black could just play f6, supporting their center like this, and getting ready to play knight to f8, having another threat. Let's maybe trade, this bishop that hasn't moved for this bishop that has moved twice, gaining a bit of a tempo advantage. Moving the knight to f8 isn't actually that bad of a move for the knight, since having the knight come to the king side where it can help deal with the h-pawn, is a pretty decent idea. But this is not what happened in the game. Instead, back in this position, white just played bishop to e2 because white probably saw all this. Was like, yeah, I don't want to allow that. Black plays pawn to e5 anyway. Black has the center. Black probably wants to keep this pawn alive if possible. Maybe play pawn to d4 at some point. So we have pawn to h4. Bishop comes back to d6 because it was honestly very silly over here, with it being blocked by the pawn. We have pawn to h5. White is trying to make good use of their asset, of their strong pawn. In a way, this also kind of brings this rook into the game, as now the rook is doing something useful. It's supporting the pawn. Black plays knight to f6. It's attacking, attacking the pawn. White plays bishop to g5, developing. And, let's see, really quick. I remember there are some interesting tactics if, black goes after the pawn. For example, knight takes h5 isn't good because the knight would be pinned, so white could probably move this knight out of the way and, threaten both the knight and the rook in a way. Okay, so rook takes h5, on the other hand, is a line that I should probably look at really quick. I think after rook takes h5, white might be able to just castle queenside and just be very active. Let's see. Either that, or maybe do some tactics involving, this bishop and knight and stuff. Like maybe rook takes h5, knight takes, and then knight takes e5, and then take the knight over there. Or, let's see what the engine has to say. Okay, so let's see. The engine says that castling queenside is okay, but it does give black a very slight edge. It's best for white to instead play rook takes h5, knight takes h5, knight takes e5, and then after, let's see. That's a pretty funny idea, actually. Black could play knight to g3, for example, but bishop takes e5, it slightly prefers that. Bishop takes h5, and here there's still a game to be played, but I do actually kind of like white a bit better here. Just white might be able to get to this file first. White can castle queenside, stuff like that. White's pieces are, all coming all out. Black's center has kind of been little bit weakened by the loss of the e-pawn. Like, the e-pawn can no longer support the d-pawn. The d-pawn is now a bit of a backward pawn. And so there would still be a game to be played, but I agree with the engine that white is the one who has the edge here. Anyway, this is not what happened in the game. Instead, after the move bishop to g5, black played the move knight to g4, as the knight was under attack. Here, the knight is supported by the bishop on c8. We have rook to d1, bishop to e6. The rook was attacking the d-pawn, so black defends it with their bishop. Knight to g1, kind of attacking the pawn again by threatening to distract the bishop and then take the pawn. We have pawn to f6, next kicking this bishop away. We have bishop to c1, bishop to e7, and in this position, even though white could, win the d-pawn, black would actually win the h-pawn afterwards. For example, bishop takes, rook takes, and, oh, wait, hang on. This right? Oh, it seems that's the Lee chess has a bit of a weird glitch in it. So 1 second. There we are. Oh, oops! It's not bishop to e7. My mistake. Hey, that's it. I gave the wrong move. Similar idea, but it's not bishop to e7. King to e7. I mean, just getting the king active. Yes, this is actually a better move than bishop e7, as the bishop is not bad over here. It might come to life if black plays pawn to e4 at some point. So, sorry about that. Black played king to e7, but kind of a similar problem with white doing this. Bishop takes, rook takes, and then bishop takes h5. And the engine actually really likes this position for black. Like black's got all their pieces out. Rooks are now connected. That's one of the points of playing king to e7. And also black has the two bishops. Like, that can be very good in the endgame, especially on an open board. And especially when there are still pawns on both sides of the board. So yeah, overall this is just a great position. And white would not be winning a pawn. White would be giving up the bishop pair for no reason. So that's why in this position, instead of losing the h5 pawn through that sequence, white played pawn to h6, advancing their assets, and now maybe threatening to win this pawn. And black's like, it's fine. Black plays pawn to f5. Actually, no, black isn't saying it's fine. Black is just saying, I will defend my knight with this pawn. That way the bishop can still keep its eye on d5. So here, white played bishop to f3. And in this position, there's actually a pretty cool sequence, a pretty cool idea for black. Like, maybe you can find it. Like, I didn't see it right away. But just a cool little sequence of moves. It's probably very, very hard to see, like, especially if this was a correspondence game and black didn't see it. It's like, if you want, you can pause the video. I will reveal the sequence in 3, 2, 1. So basically, in the game, black played bishop to c5, which is an okay move. I don't hate bishop to c5. I think it's perfectly reasonable. But a pretty cool idea is after d4, bishop takes d4, rook a b8, bishop to a6, pawn to f4, or black just has so much stuff here. Black is now going after this pawn on h6 over here, so white kind of has to push it. Black can still keep attacking that pawn. And here, black's just doing very, very well. Like, this pawn is just going to die. There isn't really a nice way for white to save it. Like, yes, black did give up the b7 pawn, but arguably the h pawn is much more important. And also advancing the center is very important as well. So black is making good progress on their goals. If white tries saving things with bishop to d3, then black can actually go pawn to e4. And after white moves their bishop to a square such as c4, for example, that can go d3, c takes d3, c2, rook d2, bishop b4, and wow, this is cool. This is just a cool line overall. Like, odds are, like you probably saw like the first few moves of this. You probably didn't see all of this. which is fine, very reasonable, very expected. We're only human, but I just thought this is such a cool little sequence. And here, like maybe Magnus Carlsen could see all of it. I don't know. But anyway, back in this position, white played bishop to f3 and black played bishop to c5. Apparently, the engine wants white to try breaking at the center with pawn to f4, which I think does make some sense, even though it is kind of a sacrifice of a pawn. It also does kind of disconnect the bishop from this guy over here. And even though it does double black's pawns, black will probably be able to undouble by playing knight to e3, because if white trades away the knight on e3, the pawn will just come undoubled and black's pawn structure will be pretty happy again. But anyway, this is not what happened in the game. Instead, white played bishop to f3, and black did not find that crazy sequence with pawn to d4. Black instead just played the much more human, much more intuitive bishop to c5. White now went for bishop takes g4. Black went f takes g4. The reason why white traded, I should mention really quick, is just that this pawn was under attack, and there isn't really a nice way to defend it. Like maybe knight to h3, but that looks pretty uncomfortable. That does not look fun. Blocks the rook and puts the knight on a pretty silly square, you know, all that kind of stuff. And bishop to e3 loses a pawn a different way, so that's why white traded for the knight. The knight was very strong. Here, it's actually very tricky for white to get their pieces out. Like, the knight does not have many good squares. White played a move that is very reasonable, which is knight to e2. The engine, of course, again wanted white to play pawn to f4, just trying to challenge this very strong central clump of pawns. Black played pawn to d4, just supporting, this guy over here, and advancing, black's assets, their strong central pawn majority, just sending them down the board to go after white. We have knight to g3, bishop to f7. Let's see. I think part of the idea maybe was to stop rook from coming here, or maybe just reroute the bishop so that, if the pawn comes to h7, we can just take it, that kind of stuff. Also, this pawn doesn't really need that much support, since black can potentially just bring the rook to g8 if it does come under fire. Anyway, we have knight to e4, pawn to b6. Black is okay with giving the bishop pair back, or giving up their own bishop pair, here if it means strengthening their center. Like, yes, this would be double pawns, but it would actually be quite difficult for white to get at the pawn back here, and the pawn back here would be supporting this important pawn over here. We have king to f1. White doesn't really want a castle because the rook is doing some important work on h1. We have king to d7, probably trying to reroute the king over to c6, possibly. That's my understanding of this move. It does kind of look like it is giving up this pawn, and white does take it. Black reroutes the bishop to g6, hitting this pawn in a way like black's not too concerned about the loss of that pawn anymore. Black's kind of playing more for activity right now, which is kind of interesting. We have knight to a4. I think this move is a little bit silly because black just moves their bishop, and now what is the knight doing on a4? Just oddly placed knight. Apparently it was one of the best moves according to the engine, but I don't really get it. It seems strange. We have pawn to c4, trying to save the pawn this way, maybe because it was under attack. There wasn't really any nice way of defending it, stuff like that. If we go back, like rook d2 looks very uncomfortable. Like rook d2, there might just be bishop to b4, stuff like that. So that maybe pawn to c3 is possible. Well, maybe like pawn to b5 first and then bishop to b4. I'm actually a bit curious. Let's find out. Like rook to d2 is kind of a silly move anyway, because like what is this bishop gonna do, And okay, yeah, just rook c8. Or actually the b5 idea kind of works too. Like they're both good. But rook ac8 is much better than my ideas. Like just bring another piece into the game. Why not? Like, bring your last piece and have it participate. You know, I can be a bit silly in my oversight sometimes. But that's not what happened in the game. Anyway, White played pawn to c4. Black probably does not want to take en passant, but one issue with pawn to c4 is that it means that this guy is now a protected pass pawn. Like, this guy is very strong. Black's like, okay, I'll just put my rook on f8. You know, this is fine. We have knight b2, bishop to c2, rook to d2, bishop to b1, hitting this pawn on a2. The reason why the bishop went to c2 first is number one, you take the rook off where it would be able to potentially hit the bishop on b1, and number two, you know, it kind of puts the rook on a silly square. Like, the rook is blocking the bishop now. So bishop to c2 was kind of a useful move to play, just to mess white up a little. Knight to d3, pawn to e4. Black is advancing their strong pawns as they're just slowly coming down the board. Knight to e1, pawn to e3. This knight is very sad. This rook looks funny. Everything looks funny. Oh, oops, sorry. Wrong pawn. Wrong pawn. Pawn to e3. Even stronger move. Like, d3 is good too, but e3 is probably even stronger since, like, this pawn cannot take because of the pin. And where's this rook gonna go, you know? Where's this sad rook gonna go? Is he gonna go back here and give up defense of this pawn? You know, all that kind of stuff. Like, rook, it might even be able to come in over here. Rook goes over here. That's where the rook's gonna go. Rook takes over here. King to g1. King to c7. Black is getting ready to attack. And in this position, it's actually very interesting. White played rook takes d6, and there's a good reason as to why. If you want, you can pause the video and try to see what black would play if white now played bishop takes e3. So if you want, you can try to see why white might not have played this move. I will reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. So the reason why is because after rook to e2, there isn't really all that nice of a way for white to defend this bishop. So white has to kind of just move it somewhere. And the bishop really does not want to come off of this diagonal. Well, because, you know, if it does, then black has bishop to c5. So that's no good. And one move that I forgot to look at was bishop to f2. But I think just pawn to g3 would take care of that. Like, the bishop would just be completely trapped at that point. Right? Like, white would not be happy to see that. And so, yeah, that is why bishop takes e3 was not played. And instead, in this position, white's played rook takes d6, as this bishop is just monstrous. It is just a very nasty bishop. Like, it was probably planning to come to c5 and maybe start making use of this diagonal, you know, all that kind of stuff. Although, it should be interesting. Like, I should just talk a little bit about, you know, what could have happened after, say, rook takes g4, since that's an interesting move. Rook takes g4, engine gives rook h f8, threatening mate in 1 with rook to f1, since the bishop covers the h2 square. And yeah, things are really not looking pretty here. Yeah, I don't see any. Like, I think white's just in a lot of trouble because this bishop could even potentially come to c5 and make use of this diagonal. Also, black could just play, you know, stuff like this, like put the pawn up there, then move here, then maybe take here, or take there first, and then bring the other rook up, and then take this guy, and then just have this very strong pawn over here. Like, white's position is just not very pleasant. White has to do something about this mate threat. White doesn't have time to play pawn to h7. And so that is likely why rook takes g4 is no good, or, you know, any other move is no good. Right, so that is probably why white played rook takes d6, just to get rid of some of black's attacking pieces. It can be pretty difficult to attack if you run out of pieces. Is like, now the h2 square is potentially free for the king. But, you know, rook takes d6 is still kind of a concession, since it's, you know, giving up material, it's giving up an exchange. We have bishop takes e3, rook takes a2, c5 check, king 2 c6. Let's see, trying to remember why did not just take. I think it was just because it would mess up black's pawn structure a little bit. That was probably the reason, although this still kind of messes up the pawn structure. But anyway, I think there was a good reason as to why black did not take with the pawn, although it actually looks fine in my opinion. Why didn't black do this? Let's find out. Black's still winning. I don't know why black didn't do it. But black's still winning by a comparable amount. B takes c5 is fine. Maybe black just didn't want to mess up their pawn structure. Or maybe black just didn't care about their pawns. I'm actually more inclined to believe the latter just because of how the game kind of continued. So c takes b6, a takes b6, rook h4, rook e2, hitting both of these guys over here. Bishop to f2, bishop to f5, defending the g-pawn, rook to h5, bishop to h7, pawn to b4, rook to f8, getting this rook into the game. Bishop is on h7 so that the rook can come off of the h-file. We don't have to worry about pawn to h7. Although even if, pawn to h7 happened, like, rook could probably just go back and, well, actually no, bishop would be able to come to d4. Like, black has to watch out for that kind of stuff, those kind of resources. Anyway, rook f8, pawn to b5 check. A bit concerning to be pushing this pawn just because it's not on the same color as white's bishop, so white might have difficulty defending it. We have king to d7. Black seems to be kind of playing for tricks in a way, because if white's like, ooh, free pawn, I think black can just go bishop to e4 with some nasty mating ideas. Let's just take a look at that really quick. Oh no, I'm so silly. That was the knight's hanging. That's why. Yeah, bishop takes b6. Just take the knight for free. I'm very silly. Anyway, I think I haven't had enough coffee today or something. Anyway, bishop to g3, rook to f5. Black would just like to trade material off and go into an endgame where black might be able to promote a pawn and stuff like that. Rook takes f5. Engine doesn't like trading, of course. Bishop takes f5. White probably traded because they were scared of black's attack. Bishop to f2. Rook e6 going after this pawn. Very important to kill this pawn. It's white's most important assets. Rook takes h6. Bishop to e3, rook to e6, king to f2, and now a bit of a weird move by black. I don't really like this move. Black played rook to e5 here, giving up this pawn, and it's like, no, don't trade your pawns, man. Like, keep the pawns on the board. It's harder to screw up if you've got more pawns on the board, because, like, when you're up material, you can use that extra material to promote a pawn. Instead, like, the engine doesn't like rook e5 much either. Instead, the engine's like, just play king to c8, and then after bishop to f4, for example, king to b7, just defend your pawn, that kind of stuff. But that's not what happened in the game. Instead, black was like, yeah, whatever, take my pawn, I don't care. Or maybe black just really doesn't care about their pawn so much. Although, there is actually a very cool move here for black that does win some material. But I still, losing the pawn like that still makes me uncomfortable. Like, if you want, you can again pause the video and try to figure out what move black now played. Like, even though black had this tactic, I still do not like giving up this pawn. I'd still just rather keep the pawn alive. But I'll give you a hint. Black does not care about their pawns, apparently. So I will reveal the move in 3, 2, 1. So in this position, black just is like, yeah, take my other pawn. I don't care about pawns. And white, of course, has to take. White has to take the pawn here and give up their knight. It's actually very interesting. If white does not take, if white plays king to f1, then black plays bishop to e6, and white will lose a piece a different way, because bishop to c4 check is kind of threatening mate in 2, like check, king there, and then rook takes knight. right, with mate. And if white like moves their knight to f3, for example, if white does this, then we would have like this check here, and then rook takes here, and you know, like white would have to lose their bishop, like maybe play bishop to f2 or something, thing like I don't know. No, but it's not good. Like basically, white would be losing material this way, and black would still have this pawn. So that's why in this position, instead of going king f1, which is the only real alternative, like I guess king f3 could be played, but black would still just take the knight. White took the pawn over here, black took the knight. We have bishop to f2, rook to b1, pawn to b6, bishop to e4, king to h2, rook to b3, and it was in this position that white now resigned. In my opinion, white should probably play on just for a few more moves, just to see if black can actually find the right plan for mating white in this position, since like black can deliver checkmate. Like there is a way to do it. It's just, you know, a little bit more complicated just because black doesn't have any more pawns on the board. It's much easier, like much simpler to just keep at least one pawn and promote that guy. Like this is kind of messy. Like basically this pawn's pretty annoying for black to always be keeping an eye on. And let's see. I don't think I'll cover this endgame since you know, this series isn't really about covering endgames, and this is not an elementary endgame game, but basically what black wants to do is just restrict white's king, like box white's king in and bring black's own king in closer. Like try to keep this king back, like on the back rank or stuff, and win this pawn at some point. Right, like maybe at some point play like rook b2, you know, that kind of stuff. Like kind of like for now, keep the rook here, just restrict the king, stop him from coming forward. It greatly discourages white from pushing this pawn to g4, you know, stuff like that. And then just bring the king in and win the stuff. Like showing actual moves here would actually get pretty complicated since there are lots of possibilities, there are lots of ways of, you know, playing out this endgame. It's not like the king and pawn games, but anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Bye for now. Oh, and next time I hope to be covering like either the knight e2 sideline or the e takes d5 sideline. Those are both very important sidelines to know about these days in the Winawer, so tune in for that. And once again, bye for now.